All right. Hello, higher ed community. My name is Carrie Otto, and I'm a Higher Education Advisory Council member. I'm fortunate to have the opportunity to kick off this interactive panel to learn about the do's and don'ts to maximize your engagements with contractors and vendors. This panel of favorites are also members of the Higher Education Advisory Council. Today we have Makeda, Keegan, Kathy Lueckeman, Brian Karcinski, Lori Dembowitz, hopefully soon, and Carrie Marcinkevage. Sorry, Carrie. All right. So with that, I will let you all, let's see. Are you taking it away from here? Oh, wait, here. Sorry, I'm pinch hitting here. I will be monitoring the session chat and the Q&A during the panel discussion. And regarding chat, remember to use the session chat for chats related to this session and the general chat for going to communicate about the full event. And we'll also turn on the Q&A here in just a moment. So, all right. All right, I'm turning it over to Makeda now, it looks like. Makeda, are you going to moderate for us?
I sure am, Carrie. So thank you for the handoff, and thank everybody for being here right now. As you've heard from getting us started, we're trying to get one of our key panelists online to join us right now. Before we do, we'll just go around the room and introduce ourselves very quickly, and hopefully Lori will be able to join momentarily. So I'm going to introduce myself first. My name is Makeda Keegan. I'm from Northeastern University. I'm a business analyst over there in the Office of Strategic Enrollment Initiatives and Enrollment Management. Northeastern's been one of the earliest higher ed Salesforce customers in the ecosystem. So I think there's only one school that actually started using Salesforce before we did, but it's been incredible to be part of this team across the university and watch folks learn and grow and be able to maximize Salesforce in helping our community. Brian, why don't you introduce?
Sure. Brian Karcinski. I'm at the University of Florida. I'm the Salesforce Solution Architect on our Enterprise org. We have some smaller orgs on campus, but the Enterprise org is the main one. We're up to about 800 users now. Our main use case really is around student success, but also faculty and staff as customers for our users. And I will pass it to Carrie.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Carrie Marcinkevage. I'm from Penn State University, Smeal College of Business. And Smeal has had a Salesforce org for about 12 years, multi-constituent from prospect through alumni. And then Penn State has 5 that I'm aware of, various orgs for different use cases across the university, about 25 use cases.
Kathy, would you like to introduce us? I'm sorry, Carrie, were you doing it?
I'm sorry. I was going to hand it off. Kathy?
Oh.
Hey guys, I'm Kathy Lueckeman. I work at Olivet Nazarene University. I always say I'm the queen of titles that mean nothing. I'm the chief strategy officer there. That means I get to meddle in a lot of things. Olivet's the 3rd school at which I've implemented Salesforce, and I'm a Salesforce MVP, member of the Higher Education Advisory Council, and Higher Ed User Group Leader. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you all panelists. So let's get started. So we are here to talk about how we can better manage and maximize our engagements with contractors and vendors. And I guess we should probably start from the beginning. And to the panel, I'm just going to call on folks and we'll see where it goes. But let's start with you, Kathy. How can institutions find an approved partner, or approved contractor? How does that work? Where can they go?
So glad you asked me that question specifically, because I'm going to share something kind of embarrassing. My very first implementation back in 2011 at Wayne State University, I was asked who was our partner, and I went, my IT partner? I didn't even know what a partner was. So when you're getting started, you might start out like I was and not even know what a partner was. But the good news is that you can find approved partners on Salesforce.org's website. They're also on the App Exchange. You can read reviews of them on the App Exchange. So I will tell you, probably the best place to find an approved partner is by talking to our peers, talking to other schools. We know each other pretty well. We're pretty good about all of us talking together and sharing, and you'll get some great, insight into what partners are great at if you talk to your peers.
Some great advice, Kathy, and I'm glad that you were you answered the question in the interest of full disclosure of where your starting point was, because we all need to start from somewhere, and there's really no embarrassment of it, right? We're all here to help each other out. But I do want to acknowledge that Lori Dembowitz from UMass Lowell has joined us. I hope your audio is working okay, Lori. Can you take a minute to introduce yourself?
I hope it's working okay too.
Sounds great.
Yeah, Lori Dembowitz, UMass Lowell. I serve the campus as Associate CIO for Enterprise Applications, and Salesforce is one of the key things that we do at UMass Lowell. We've been a client since 2014, and we have one enterprise org with a focus on student success and about 300 users.
Fantastic, Lori. We're so happy that you were able to join us. I'm going to let you get settled in for a minute. I was going to come out and ask you a question right away, but hold tight. My eyes are drifting towards Brian's direction right now, because, I may have started off with Kathy a little ahead of myself. We're talking about how to pick a partner and how to engage consultants. But I mean, how do you balance even deciding to spend money on a consultant or a vendor or a contractor as opposed to doing things in-house? What are your thoughts on that, Brian?
Yeah, I think, we have, like I mentioned, we're up to about 800 users, probably have upwards of 30 different groups that make up those users, right? So some come to us with, hopes and dreams of a very elaborate system that would cost a lot of money. And then, do they have money? Usually not. But there are some groups, right, that do have money. They do have maybe a clear vision and even a plan built out of what they want. And so really, for us, we sort of evaluate when people come to us. For the most part, on our org, we do a lot of the work ourselves because we're fortunate enough to have a fair amount of FTE on our team, right? So that's also part of the calculation, right? What does your staffing look like? Do you have a developer on your team to be able to do some more complex work if that's what's needed for some of the projects? Some schools are very lean on the staff side of things, and they lean on consultants a lot more. So I think the FTE, like what your staffing looks like, a lot of schools sort of transition, right? You start very lean staff-wise, you use some consultants, and then maybe you say, hey, I want to staff up, and then all of a sudden you wean off and you're not using consultants as much. So it's really kind of a complicated puzzle, and especially with enterprise orgs and a lot of the folks on this call, as you get larger and your org gets larger, sometimes those decisions change based on what your staffing model looks like, and obviously funding plays a large part as well.
Many elements there, Brian, and what I'm hearing from you is that it's really not a one-size-fits-all answer to that question. It really depends on what your institution's resources are and such to make sure that you're making that right decision now and in the future. So we'll look back to you, Brian, because we have a couple more questions along those veins, but I want to hop around a little bit and talk about engaging those consultants or those contractors or vendors. Lori, what are some of the first things that you should consider when you're thinking about engaging a contractor or a vendor? What should be first and foremost on your mind?
Well, what's the use case, right? What are you looking to do? And from there, you would have business requirements and some technical requirements hopefully built out. But there's that, right? Getting a good baseline, and then talking with folks who in the Salesforce community has used which consultants, which vendors, which partners. What's their experience been? Were they satisfied? What did they do for those projects? What would they do differently? So getting a good kind of baseline, working with the community, and talking to the vendors, talking to the folks. We've had good luck over the years with many of our partners. So that's how I'd start out.
Lori, a follow-up question. You packed a lot into that little answer there, so I'm going to have to pull it apart and spread it out amongst the panel a little bit. But you talked about gathering requirements, technical and functional, which of course makes my heart sing because I am a BA. But do you think a lot of people go out and put together their RFP and then they do that after? Should they be doing that requirement step before or after, and why?
Well, for us, I think it should be done before, right, if at all possible, and that at a high level, that should go into the RFI or RFP. Every institution is different. We're a public institution, and so for a large project, we need to go out for RFP. But to the extent that you can, include the goals of what you're looking to do, about your organization, if you already have users and use cases there, what you're looking to do functionally, right? What you're looking to do, if technically, although you would hope that the partner would help you do that. And also from a business standpoint, are there any questions, key things, concerns that your institution needs from a business standpoint to move forward? So I think so, Makeda.
Thanks, Lori. I want to zoom in on another point that you made, and a point that I've been hearing quite a bit this afternoon, interviewing, asking other schools, or even interviewing potential partners or contractors. Kathy, if you don't have a lot of experience in this manner, how can you figure out even what questions to ask?
It's a really great question, and I am a huge believer in the community, but Google's your friend in the Salesforce world. You can, do a Google search and find tons of resources. Plus, Salesforce itself has provided a lot of resources, more and more and more every year. And they have one specific one called the Implementation Partner Selection Assessment Tool. Long name, but it's available in the help and training documentation as a knowledge article. And that's a great resource to use when you're interviewing partners and really want to do, an assessment with a good rubric.
So just getting a solid rubric, making sure that you're coming from a place where, you can ask the pointed questions that you need is so important for vendor selection. But, let's jump into vendor selection itself for a minute. So when we're talking vendor selection, what kinds of questions should we be asking vendors other than the interview questions? But, there's some specific issues that folks need to kind of keep an eye on, and some gotchas that aren't completely obvious. So Carrie, could you talk a little bit about some of the things that you should keep in mind if maybe it's not on that rubric, or maybe it's not on those list of questions that Kathy listed, just from your experience?
Yeah, sure. One of the questions, and I actually credit our procurement office for starting the conversation on this, was about vendor relationships and vendor staffing. And specifically, so we had one of those unfortunate situations once where we had several team members on the partner side who left partway through the engagement. And what we hadn't set up was a communication plan and a transition plan for how they would keep continuity of the project. So it became an important lesson learned for us to say, if you're going to engage a vendor, find out exactly who the resources are, how many, and then what's their transition plan and communication plan for if something happens with any of their staff. I mean, we should have it for our own as well, but very important to have it for them.
Carrie, you talked about something we haven't talked about before, the procurement office. So, I think that's a really great point that you made there. Why is it important? Why is it important to engage them? We kind of talked about that already, but at what point in the process should you engage them?
Sure. It's advisable for us, so we're a large public institution, to do it right away. So they've helped us draft the RFP. They've got language, they've got a specific format for it. They have rubrics that can help us with the scoring. And when we have metrics of success, when we've got a good understanding of what we need, they're very helpful in helping us clarify that. They'll look at all of the legal MSAs. They'll help us dive down into the relationships and how licensing is structured. They can be immensely helpful. And if you engage them early, you can build that into the RFP process. And the further they are along with you on the ride, the faster the process will be, because they don't have to keep coming back to you and asking questions along the way, because they've been there the whole time.
So procurement brings a very specific and targeted set this entire process that folks shouldn't overlook. That's what I'm hearing from you, Carrie.
Absolutely.
And Brian just pops up in the chat. He says, you can roll out case management for procurement to be Salesforce users also. So Brian, it's a very good point. I'm glad you made that.
Actually here. Yeah.
So, but since you've opened yourself up in the chat, I'm going to have you open your mic and answer another question for me. So, insofar as you kind of did it a little bit. So, let's talk about solutioning a little bit. How do you provide value to users with out-of-the-box functionality that's relatively easy to configure versus like a complicated project that could take time and money? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this is pretty much how we've grown from 100 users to 800 in a couple of years, is really just with a foundation of case management. And I see Kathy shaking her head because Kathy's probably heard me tell this story 700 times. But our approach really has been to rely on Salesforce native functionality to build a foundation. So, we'll have groups come to us and say, hey, we want to do phone integration. We want to start sending texts. And, we'll often say, well, do you have shared mailboxes and communication issues? And all of them say yes. And so that's really our starting point. So to give you a specific example, not the procurement project that we're working on right now, but with our Office of Research, our contracts and grants office, we brought them in phase 1 for case management, moved them over from a shared mailbox, just worked on that. Now we're working on DocuSign as a phase 2. So for us, it's really sort of focusing on using that foundational native Salesforce functionality. And there's other stuff besides case management as well that you can build that on and then add on, right? And then that also, when you have that foundation, it makes it potentially a little easier to bring in maybe a partner to do something else that's a little bit more elaborate, because you've already figured out sort of your core architecture and you're using Salesforce native functionality. You haven't gone off and done anything crazy with custom objects that makes it not compatible with a lot of potential project or products and all of that. So that's been our approach. But also to reiterate, just talk to as many other schools as possible. Whenever we talk to a vendor, where we say, well, what other school implemented this? There's other people, there's some schools that are doing really unique trailblazing things, but most all of us are doing something that someone else has already done. And find those schools. It could be asking, a Salesforce employee to put you in touch. It could be asking the vendor, a consultant. Just talk to people who have done a similar project that you're looking at.
Thanks, Brian. I think that's important. And I think we're going to hear that over and over and over again, the importance of communication between, institutionals, communication about different sort of vendor and contracting options, because, we're, to your point, many of us are trying to do very similar things. So it doesn't make sense to go off in your corner and reinvent the wheel. So that's a key takeaway. But since you started talking about development and you started talking about some custom objects, it kind of made me think about custom development. Sometimes when we're working with outside vendors, there are a lot of options whether you should go to like out of the box or if you should develop custom solutions. what's a good rule of thumb on that? And I'm going to throw this to Kathy because just to mix it up a little bit, because I know in the past you have had strong opinions and good advice about this as well. So
Yeah, I always have strong opinions, don't I? I would say that you should resource yourself for the solution that you pursue, meaning that not every school is comfortable with custom development, so they should probably stick to clicks, not code. Some schools can afford to have support, managed by a partner, and that's perfectly okay as long as you are resourced to have that partner manage it for you. Though we see most schools that have custom code really invest in, in-house devs. So you have to really know your own school and your own culture.
And no real kind of one size fits all rule of thumb for that. But I think you're making a really good point about declarative or code, and what can you do to make sure whatever decision you make is supported or support going forward, and not get too carried away. I want to take a little bit of a U-turn or a little veer off for a second. And, I think when we're talking about bringing in contractors or vendors, we're usually talking about improving some technical aspect of what you're doing, but it usually also means that there's going to be some change management on some level in different ways happening. Carrie, can you talk a little bit about the repercussions from that change management piece, and what role, if any, can a vendor play in that?
Yeah, I sometimes think that when we're looking, whether it be an RFP, a big or a small project, we tend to overlook the people side of what that vendor, that partner will bring to our organization. And if you think about it, what a great opportunity to make sure that you pick a vendor, pick a supplier who can further whatever your goals are culturally and from a change management perspective. So if you pick a vendor where they've got the same change management philosophy or a strategic approach, or they've got the same value system, right, that your organization does, when they come in, they become a representative of your brand. And they can help you, and they might actually be trusted in ways that your team may not be, right? Because they're the objective third-party consultants. So they can carry an awful lot of weight, and they can lift a pretty heavy burden of change management for you and on your behalf. So utilize that opportunity to have them be part of the carriers of your culture and your goals and your message.
Carrie, that's really interesting. And I think if more people sort of thought like that, I think they'd figure out that, you have a lot of dynamic options with doing your such, because it's not just a technical exercise, right? It's also a cultural exercise as well. It can be. So really, really great points there. So I will share with the panel that I'm feeling a little guilty right now because I've been grilling y'all so hard over the past 25 minutes or so. And I am a firm believer that turnabout is fair play. So I am going to open up and ask y'all on the floor if you have any questions for yours truly. Fire away.
I'll go first.
Uh-oh.
Makeda, you have been such a pioneer, and Northeastern, I mean, my goodness, such a veteran user. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you being such a mature user, go about working with partners?
Well, it's interesting. Like you said, we've been doing this institutionally for a while. I've been at the institution for longer. I'd probably care to admit on this during this presentation, but all good, all good. A lot of the tips that we're talking about are things that we've figured out through trial and error through the years. I think one of the biggest pieces, and I can't remember if I think it was Lori who made this point, making sure that you've got some baseline requirements down before you even put together your RFP or RFI. And then the importance of talking to your customers, trying to find out what folks really need. What are they trying to what are we trying to do? I think that's the key question that we've asked ourselves, or figured out that we've had to ask ourselves before we embark upon, building something wicked cool that, folks, oh, there's my Boston showing, sorry. That we think is pretty neat, but may not actually address the problem or serve the customer that we're trying to serve, right? So, begin with the end in mind, as they say. So that's part of that requirements gathering and that communication process. And then after that, I think that it's been very helpful for us to be able to really ask vendors certain questions. I think early in the game, we didn't really have an opportunity to talk to a lot of institutions, but as we matured, it was great to see other folks pop up in the space. So we had a chance to really communicate with our fellow institutions and get the 411 on who really we should be partnering with on certain things. And that's also been very helpful. But that communication piece, that focus piece, very, very important. And I think through a lot of trial and error, I guess I will say personally and professionally on that front, that's what I've learned, and that's what we do as a matter of practice at Northeastern. We're very grateful for our community, and we actually hope to contribute to that as well. So that's been very, very important. So
awesome.
I want to leave some time for questions, but I still have a few questions for the panel. Lori, should you pay a contractor or a vendor up front?
I don't think so. No, I mean, I would, right? Why would you? You can structure the arrangement in a variety of ways, and often you want to tie payment to deliverables, right? And just make it clear what's expected on both sides. And just one other point I wanted to make: we talked a lot about partners and vendors, but who are the people on that team who will be working with you, right? So you're going to sign a deal with, implementation partner X, but really the folks on the team who they're supplying, that's really what you want to be looking at, because you're right, the name of the company is consistent, but it's those consultants who are key. So deliverables, it goes back to all of it. And when you're looking to pay the tab, what are the deliverables? Are you poised for success? And have frequent check-in meetings to ensure that you are.
So much good information there. I do want to just say that, when I asked the question, there was a little giggling on the, we're not laughing at the fact that, was that a silly question? Honestly, as some of us know, this is something that occurs. Some organizations, some contractors ask for that up front. And, if you're new to using those sort of services, you may not know that that's not really a great way to go. And no matter what they tell you, oh, this is kind of standard operating procedure. It's like, no, not for us. So it's important to know that. Again, it's a learning process. We're all here sharing our wisdom from, learning, making mistakes, and learning from them. So I just wanted to say that up front. But, Lori, you also made a really great point about check-ins and communication, right? And having that done in a structured way is very important. And I will second that from my experience, because you all might, be taking a look at the project plan, assuming that things are going X, Y, Z, and it's really going A, B, C, and then you get back together a little while later and they hand you something, you're like, what is this? What is this? So yeah, really great points. Like I said, want to leave some time for questions. So I want to open up. Frank, do we have some questions out there that folks have been asking that we can ask the panel?
We do have some questions. Hello, Makeda, and hello all. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, perfect. I'm going to go over to the questions tab here real quick. And I do see a question. There's a couple of questions. I'm going to go ahead and start with the one that's been upvoted. We have a question from Ying Chu. I think I pronounced that correctly. How do you approach developing institution-wide strategy on Salesforce, both in terms of how to source for external professional services and when with your enterprise projects? I'll let you all take that one.
I feel like I
Who wants-
sort of addressed it a little bit before, but I think it's, for me, my quick answer would be it's really sort of understanding what your resources are internally and what you're capable of, and matching that up with the projects that you have, and understanding if something's going to take a lot of development work, that if the timeline's short, that's probably something that you can't do internally. For us, we have really been doing most all of our work ourselves for years now. But there was a large initiative to get our advancement here at UF up on Salesforce, and it turns out that's going to be a separate org, and it's a massive multi-year project that's being handled that way. So, and again, with that, talked to a lot of other schools. I tried to find a school that had it all in one org, and I failed to find that school. So it's a separate org because that's the best practice in general. But anyone else?
Just a quick thought on in terms of overall CRM strategy. And for me, that's near and dear, right? What is the strategy that supports all of it? And from an enterprise perspective, the willingness to have a consultant, a vendor come and help you do the interviews, ask the questions. Kyla Farrell from Wisconsin, Madison, did a wonderful presentation on org structure, and she talked about using consulting for that strategy up front and all the interviews they did. Willingness to have a consultant or a partner for strategy. And then there are lots of different individual vendors, partners, consultants who can help with specific implementations of specific types of use cases. So the willingness to mix and match and use multiple across the board.
All right. There is another question in the Q&A session. So this is from our friend Haley Gould. And her question is, how do you split amongst vendors and your teams? Curious about how you might organize work between the two. Great question.
I could take a shot at it. So for the implementation partners that we've had, it's because we've had a large project. And so there's a defined work product that we're hoping to get out of it at the end. And so, there's generally an agile methodology that's used, and vendors will come in and help us to configure and develop that. And so the split would be, they'll be doing that work with our teams, IT team, and our functional users right there with them. And so then it would move from a kind of a dev to a test, and testing is so important, and then to production. And so in that sense, that's how we've been working with implementation. Testing is super important because at the end of the day, you want to achieve success. But we also want to have partners who will teach us how to fish, not just fish for us. So in that sense, that part of the engagement is super important, and we want to be left with, on the IT side, something that we can support, that's documented and supportable. So that's it.
How, it's interesting. Haley's question sort of keyed off a question of my own that I wanted to fly here to the panel. So, we're talking about division of labor between consultants and on board staff. How important is management for both sides, and what would be a best practice for making sure that both sides are in step with each other insofar as that concerned? Carrie, you're laughing, so I think you're going to try to answer this one.
I am laughing because, right, so we've in a couple of different projects. At the enterprise level, we stood up Health Cloud and did COVID response. And at the business school, right, we've had our org. And I will tell you that at the business school, we don't have official project managers. At the enterprise level for the Health Cloud, we did. And boy, was that refreshing and wonderful. And you know what? You make deadlines when you have project management and good project managers, and you miss them more frequently when you don't. And I mean, that's kind of the end all be all. When you add a vendor to the mix, they need project managers and we need project managers. And if you've got it on both sides, the likelihood of making the deadlines to me has been significantly higher.
Project management is important both from the vendor side of things, but also from your own internal side of things, especially for a project of any significant size. And if that's lacking, you know, you're not going to have success. I mean, it is what it is. Maybe not with an individual consultant coming to augment your staffing, but with a large project and a team, you need it on both sides, no question.
I have one more question for folks, and I think we can squeeze it in, Frank. Tell me if I'm wrong, but we're talking about our engagements with our consultants and contractors, but now we've reached the end of a particular. How important, or rather, what are some of the first things that you should do after you wrap up an engagement, and why is that important? I'll call on somebody. Kathy.
You know, I've been talking so much. I'd love to answer this. I'll just say one thing so others can chime in too. I love having a good review, making sure that we go through and document our lessons learned, right? So that we can learn from our mistakes, and I've made so many, so that we can have a better implementation for our next use case.
Anybody else want to add to that?
Celebrate the good. We all did
Celebrate the good.
Celebrate the wins.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I agree. Celebrate that and make sure, you know, check in with business partners, right? Because it's new. It's a change, and it should be celebrated, and they should be able to use the functionality to do good things for the institution. So.
That's great. I think we're coming up on time, Frank. Is that the case?
I think we are. Let me double check. I'm gonna just give me a quick minute. I want to make sure that we are good to go. We actually have about 10 minutes, but we can, you know, if there's not any more questions, you know, we can continue having conversations or wrap it up however you all feel fit. Let me double check the Q&A. I don't see.
I've got more questions.
All right, you keep asking. There is no other questions in the Q&A in the chat, but go ahead. You've got plenty of time. All
right, so this is what the people came for, and you can keep names out. We've got 5 minutes, so we can keep names and places and specific institutions out. We'll just assume that you're not talking about your current institution or whatever, but can one person share a particular experience with a contractor or a vendor where one of these principles that we've been talking about really drove home, and how did you learn from that mistake?
I can share a positive one.
That's even better.
We had a partner who, that project management side, like I said, we're a bit of the paupers, believe it or not, in the business school around not having really strong project management as an expertise. The partner brought that to the table. They really drove the project management. We had a timeline, and I have never seen the capability spin up like I did for that project, because there was great communication. The project management was awesome. And they just did a wonderful job keeping not only them, but us on track and focused where we needed to be. And it was amazing. So that piece of it, when they provide it, can be invaluable. So that was a really good one.
That's great, because to your point, you can learn just as much from positive experiences than from, you know, when you don't quite do what you mean to do. And I don't want to say failure, really, because I think it's all a learning experience. And I want to emphasize again, the only reason why we're up here able to share our experiences because everyone in this room has made all kinds of mistakes. So, you know, what's a good lesson, Lori, that you carried away from any particular engagement that you've had that is sort of imprinted upon you or impressed upon you the importance of carrying out some of these principles?
You know, you have to have stakeholders who buy in, and they have to drive and want to lead, right? Because IT's in the bus, procurement will be in the bus, but at the end of the day, they have to want it and use it and own it.
Good point about owning it. And I think we've just been told that will be the last response and the last question. Frank, well, first off, I want to thank our thank you for sharing your wisdom and your time. And I want to thank the audience too. Frank, what do we have coming up next for the people?
Well, what we have coming up, and if you saw in the chat, we have our closing celebration coming up. So please join us over in that session that will be starting in a couple of minutes to just kind of celebrate ourselves, celebrate our community, celebrate this event. Thank you, Makeda, for moderating this session. Fantastic job. And I will mention, I put a link in the chat, so I'm going to give folks a chance to go grab that link. It's a great document that has been produced and over time by these experts and others. So take advantage of that tool. Enjoy. Thank you for joining. And let's go celebrate.
Thanks.
Thank you.